The great hunter, Natara. She is beautiful, isn't she?
Yep.
Yes.
What is up, guys? This is your boy Zilla, and welcome to today's episode as I'll be giving my official review and breakdown of the Mortal Kombat movie and why it is total garbage. Before I do that, please hit that subscribe button, also hit the notification bell so you get a notification every time I make a video, guys. Let's get this, because ladies and gentlemen, we have just experienced one of the worst video game movie adaptations I've ever seen from a writing perspective. Now, the effects were good, and even though that's only like probably 10% of the movie, because most of the movie's dialogue and talking and walking around, therefore I have to judge the movie off of that, or at least most of the movie. And off of that, it's complete garbage. So to just illustrate and break down the reason why this movie is so terrible from a writing perspective, let's go from character to character and see how some of the visual effects and some of the actor choices were actually pretty good, but the writing bogs down the character, in most cases strips certain characters for other characters who are not worth the time of day. And one of those characters we all know is Cole, okay? Cole is the epitome of a useless character, especially from the perspective of a video game fan, because essentially what he does, right, is that he replaces Scorpion in the story, a character that is so beloved by the fans, that he was so well portrayed in this movie. And essentially he gets like, what, 5 to 10 minutes of screen time being replaced by an inferior character who has an inferior arc and it's just not that interesting. And then on top of that, he takes Liu Kang's character of being the one chosen to be represented in Mortal Kombat and eventually becoming the champion after dealing with all the pressure of trying to win this tournament. But instead we get Cole, who loses at the beginning of the film, gets sent home by Ren because he's so garbage. Then instead of actually improving as a fighter, he just awakens his arcana and gets basically the cheapest power ever seen in this franchise's history. So basically at this point he can take no damage, which means he doesn't have to grow any skill, he doesn't have to overcome an obstacle. He is just great by the proxy of nobody being able to hurt him. And he then takes out the 9-time Mortal Kombat champion Goro, who basically had no build up in this film and was completely butchered at a moment's notice of this guy getting his first arcana awakening and somehow being skilled enough to pull off a fatality. So Goro basically just got, you know, dumped all over in the film. But he's not the only one, bro. Reptile gets his whole character ripped down, gets turned to a generic dinosaur used as cannon fodder. General Raiko looked like an over-the-top kid show supervillain with over-exaggerated expressions every time he swung that hammer. Then we got Melina, who without Katana really shouldn't exist. So that means Katana maybe has to be, or has to exist somewhere. But now you can't really develop her character because her character was centered around her being cloned from Katana. So basically now she doesn't have a story and she's just in the movie because, you know, she has very wild teeth and she's gonna use them at some point, even though she let somebody live because they didn't have a mark. Even though her character would consistently do vindictive stuff like that to any character. So yeah, then comes the cherry on top, okay? The cherry on top of this crap sandwich. We get Natara in the film. One of the worst characters in Mortal Kombat history, one that probably half the fan base barely even knows about until this movie coming out. And she probably had or rivaled the screen time of Scorpion, who was barely in the film for probably what, like 5 or 10 minutes. This girl got hyped up in her own scene, even though it was kind of weird. So her being in this movie is an automatic L. For you to skip out on other characters, you could put Kench, you could put Baraka, you could put any assortment of different characters who were in the actual story, but you brought Natara, one of the worst received characters in Mortal Kombat history. It's just mind-blowing. But actually there was a character on the side of the villains that was actually done right, and I think got the appropriate amount of screen time and character work, and that's Kabal. Kabal's powers were perfectly, I think, replicated in the movie. His effects look good, his gear looked good, he had some good lines in the film, and I think generally the way he died was actually really cool too. The Liu Kang, one of the best parts of the film, which really has nothing to do with the writing. It's just proper, you know, using his powers and translating the film. That's more on the effects department and the choreography department of the film, which I give whole praise to, and I wish they could have did more work instead of this plot not giving them enough fights or not setting up enough fights for them to really make this film A tier, or at least B tier, or at least above average. Sonya Blade was decent also in this film, but without her rivalry with Kano and them kind of loosely knowing about each other, having more of a rivalry friendship rather than an actual hate for each other like in the games, those characters really defined each other, because how Sonya made it to the tournament was following Kano, so that was the primary goal of hers, not to just win the tournament, but to also capture Kano, which was kind of her character. But now that you kind of strip that away, now they had to work together. She kind of seems a little aimless throughout the film, and that also goes for Jax too, who, other than that scene when he got killed or nearly killed by Sub-Zero, he was kind of aimless the whole film. The Arcana didn't make sense where he grew arms, because Arcana is kind of more spiritual kind of power, and the arms were physically put on him, so that doesn't make sense. Then, you know, Sonya getting crushed and not being killed, then Sonya getting her Arcana so fast, so the whole Arcana arcs were just dumb. Then Cole's Arcana was him getting armor and not taking any damage, which is weird. Kano getting his eye laser instead of him just installing it as a technological feature. Like the whole concept of Arcanas are just stupid, and I don't think I had to really get in detail with that for you to really see how dumb that is. And then we have the really only great character of this film, the person that carried this film, the person that made this film actually watchable to a certain degree, and that's Kano. Kano's character was so fantastic in the film. Even though he had to sacrifice a lot of the more intimidating parts of his character, he was still fun to watch, kept me interested in the movie, and, you know, had an interesting dynamic with each of the characters in the film, even though these guys had limited character development. But there is one line that really annoys me from that film, and that's the line where he says he used to run guns through Raiden's temple. Now, that line right there single-handedly takes his character from an A-class character down a little bit for me, because that really doesn't make any sense for the film. Why would Raiden let guns be run through his temple or even near his temple? He would probably be able to see him, so that other than that, Kano was really perfect in this movie. Kung Lao was for the most part bland, and he had a couple of jokes in there, especially about Kano, that was actually pretty funny. I feel like we should have seen a little bit more of the personality side, but other than that, he was pretty accurately portrayed. He had a great fatality on Natara, and the bigger tragedy here is Liu Kang. Obviously, as I said before, he was the main character in the games. To be stripped of that for this other character and be relegated to basically a teacher role is just kind of insulting, you know, to the Mortal Kombat lore. This movie, Raiden and Shang Tsung and their representation of Earthrealm and Outworld in this movie. First of all, they didn't get Raiden right. Raiden looks dumb. He's not an old master. He's a person who can fully capable of fighting because he's immortal, and an elder god or a demigod, depending on which source material you're going off of. Then on top of that, they don't make his eyes all white. Instead, they make it like this sort of translucent where you can kind of see his pupils, which just messes up the whole look of Raiden. It's just weird what they did with him. Then at the beginning of the movie, Scorpion disappears, and then Raiden comes and gets his baby, ? Why would he do that? That was really never explained, even though he was trying to preserve, I guess, the bloodline of the Hasashi family. But what makes that so special if that was Arcana based? Why would his bloodline matter if all that matters is his Arcana being awakened by just having the mark? It's just a whole lot of weird stuff. Then, you know, the whole teleporting problem, Raiden not thinking of teleporting his fighters into that realm after pretty much Kung Lao gets slaughtered, and, you know, he could have just took him there in the first place where they could have been safe to train. Instead, he keeps them at the temple where they get ambushed by Shang Tsung. Then he teleports all the enemies in different places, but then why didn't Shang Tsung do that? And that's just kind of dumb. Then Shang Tsung doesn't teleport his fighters back to where he can see them once Raiden teleports them away from them, because we see he's had the property to teleport people to a certain location like he did in the movie, but when, you know, Raiden separates them forcibly, he can't teleport to them or teleport them back to his location, which is strange. Then Raiden, you know, respects the Elder God's wishes not to cheat, while Shang Tsung is actively cheating constantly to the point where basically he's trying to get the tournament not to happen pretty much almost. And Raiden, when he put up the shield, didn't just phone up the elder gods to like, hey, this dude's cheating. And then the whole thing about Shang Tsung trying to stop the tournament. If you've won 9 tournaments in a row and you're trying to go for the 10th one, why would you cheat to such an extent that you're going to not have the tournament happen, basically, which is basically what happened in the film. Wouldn't you want to cheat during the tournament so you can go ahead and win the tournament and merge Outworld with Earthrealm? It's just all this crazy logic that they're trying to apply in this movie doesn't make sense, goes away from the source material, which did it better and they could have did it in this movie. And it's just, there's so many plot holes in this film that I haven't even got to or won't be able to get to without this video being freaking 30 minutes long. But just the gist of it is that this movie takes away from its 2 most popular characters, Scorpion and Sub-Zero. They are the 2 best and well portrayed characters in this movie other than Kano. They gave Scorpion 10 minutes to work with, replaced him with a character that was worse on every single level. Sub-Zero basically doesn't do anything for most of the movie but play henchman. There's no Scorpion Sub-Zero rivalry, and even though they fought at the end of the movie, that's still a plot hole, because where did Scorpion came from? Out the dagger? And does Scorpion already have magical properties? Like, none of it makes sense. And then how old is Sub-Zero and Scorpion at this point? Like, and if they were alive for this long, couldn't you just have them themselves be in the movie, completely eliminating Cole? Therefore, like, Liu Kang could have been the main character again. Then Scorpion and Sub-Zero's rivalry could have been throughout the movie, throughout multiple fights, which would have put the onus on them and actually made a better movie out of it. Like, there's just so many question marks about this film and its logic, and more importantly, its awful writing that just doesn't do the simple things that it's supposed to do, which is have good setups for the fights. This film is not about story. You know, the story's just there to set up the great combat, but the juicy part of this film that everybody wants to consume is the fights. And this film gets that part right on pretty much every fight they do. The problem is that most of the film should just be fighting instead of story and having tidbits of lore and story in between, but instead this film spends like nearly 2 hours boggling around with a half-retarded story to end up not even having a tournament. And in my eyes, that's just something that just cannot happen in your first introduction into what you want to be a new franchise or a trilogy going into, you know, the next couple of years. In my opinion, Mortal Kombat as a movie, it's like a 3 or 4 out of 10. It's below average, and to me as a Mortal Kombat fan, I would rate it even lower to maybe a 2, only, or, you know, 2 or 3, just because of the great fight choreography and work that just gets bogged down and gets pushed to the side for this pretty much awful storyline that they're telling. And if you're a Mortal Kombat fan or just a basic film fan, put in the comment section what you think about this movie, where it fails, where it could have been better, and what is the future of this franchise now that they're hinting at a sequel. This has been the best Gojira and film reviews. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, also hit the notification bell so you get a notification every time I make a video. And I will see you guys next time.